Leadership and Yoga fam. There is a story of change that shapes everything that I do, that completely changed how I live my life when I heard it. And this story starts on the cold, dark lake bed. And we know this creature for what it is when it becomes a creature of the sky. It's a dragonfly when it becomes a creature of the sky, but it hasn't always been a creature of the sky. I never knew this, but the dragonfly actually lives most of its life underwater. It is a creature of the dark, a creature of the depths. And what happens is that one day the dragonfly starts to make its way towards the surface. And what it is that exactly pulls it towards the surface, we can only imagine, is to fulfill its sort of mystical process of transformation, because we've all heard of the story of the butterfly coming out of the cocoon completely transformed, but the dragonfly's story is even more dramatic in certain ways, because it starts to crawl its way up and make its way up towards the surface. It eventually crawls like a waterlogged creature with no wings or anything, and it just crawls its way up onto a little piece of grass or a stick or a twig or some way that it can get out of the water. And the minute that it takes itself to the surface, a process of transformation and change begins to occur. The sunlight activates deep within its DNA this system that essentially pumps the water within its body like hydraulics out into pushed wings out of the sides of its body where previously there were no wings. And sometimes, depending on the type of dragonfly, it can actually fly within 1 hour. 1 hour. A lifetime underwater, and yet when it takes itself to the surface and it allows itself to be touched by the sunlight, it enters essentially what I refer to as the magic realm. That beautiful part of nature, the parts of nature that we cannot always fully understand. We can only sit back and watch with awe. And I love the story of the transformation of the dragonfly, because there's a certain moment when we're trying to make a change and we're trying to go through some form of transformation. We're trying to shift our identity. We're trying to become something new, become something that we've always known that we could be. And we have all of these tendencies to slip backwards, to allow the fear or the doubt or the habit or the addiction or whatever it is to come back over us and to bring us back deep into the depths of how we were living as a creature of the dark and a creature of the deep. But at a certain point, when we go through the transformation, when we have one of these moments where we're really touched by something that feels so different, that thing, have you ever had an experience or felt something that it feels so different that you can never forget it, and you say, I will never be the same. After having this experience, I will never be the same. And it's in these moments where you've essentially kind of grown your wings. And that's why at a certain point, it goes from feeling like a temptation to slip back into old habits to actually feeling like drowning. Because that is exactly what would happen to the dragonfly. If it tried to return to the deeps, it would drown. Because it is no longer a creature of the deep, it is a creature of the sky. It is a creature of the sky. And so today's episode is for you. If there's any area of your life, any part of you that you say, this part of me, I want to see it big. I want to see it in the sky. This part of me is a creature of the sky. And I want to get it out of the mud. I want to get it out of that feeling of being stuck. And that's really where it starts, is in finding the awareness and understanding which way is up, which way is down. Because in the process of change, yes, it does take effort. You do need to figure out which way is up, which way is down. You need to be aware of the fact that you're stuck, that you're underwater, which often we aren't even aware of because we're not able to see it until we remove ourselves from it. But we can hear stories from other people who have made it to the surface. We can see little hints of the surface. Maybe see a little bit of sunlight coming through, a little bit of light, a bit of ideas, a bit of inspiration coming through. And we must take that action of bringing ourselves to the surface. We must take the action to bring ourselves up there. And we must understand that it's not all about fighting. It's not all about just muscling it and making it happen, because what happens when we get to the surface is something that we cannot explain. It is where we enter the magic realm and we are touched, we are transformed by something deep within us or by something outside of us. So that is what today's episode is going to be about. It is why change is exactly what you need, even if the change is hard, even if the change feels uncomfortable, if it feels unreasonable, if it makes you want to just crawl back in your comfort cocoon. I feel you. I actually had this feeling 2 nights ago when I was getting ready to launch a big interview that many of you may have listened to, the Sri Dharma Mitra interview. And there was a part of me that was feeling so uncomfortable, so out of my comfort zone, knowing how many people were going to watch that interview, and knowing that, of course, I did the best that I could, but there was parts of me that wished I would have done things differently, and I wanted to make all of these changes, and I was thinking about what would be the most meaningful parts to pull from tons of different options, and there was a feeling that came over me, a longing for safety, you guys. I actually said these exact words. I said, I would like to be wrapped up in a blanket, in my bed, in my parents' house, like in my childhood home, watching a movie. And I don't even like to watch movies. I'm a terrible movie watcher. I get super antsy. But I was just longing for this sense of like coziness and this sense of hominess, of a home that is 1,000 miles away from where I'm living right now. And I understand and respect that part of me that thinks that sort of safety or that sense of safety is real, but I also refuse to follow it or to believe it, because on the other side, now speaking to you on the other side of going through that kind of scary experience, I feel wonderful. I feel like I've found a new home. I've broken through that upper limit, you know? And so change can really make us feel exposed. It can make us feel exposed and not understand why it is that we have to feel so sort of unsafe, right? One of my favorite stories from a complete mishap that happened is that a couple summers ago, maybe 2 summers ago, Simone and I, who is my husband, if you're new to the podcast, I say Simone, that's who I'm referring to. We were going to stay over in Eastern Washington at an Airbnb that was sort of like a glamping experience, right? It was really cool. And the day that we were driving over, the host messaged me and said, "Hey, there's been a mishap. The tent has blown down in a strong windstorm and we cannot fix it, but don't worry because now it's an under the stars experience. It's great, you know, you're up on the platform, everything is still set up for you. It's not going to rain. It hardly ever rains anyways in Eastern Washington." And we were already driving, so I was like, "Well, okay. I guess it is an under the stars experience for us." And that felt okay. I've slept under the stars before, not on a platform in like a normal bed, usually in a sleeping bag, you know, in a camping scenario, but we get there and we set everything up, and as we're going to kind of getting ready for bed, the wind really starts to blow. Which, as you are listening, you may say, well, yes, weren't you afraid of that? That's the reason why the tent blew down, of course, right? Very obvious. But the wind just really starts to rip. You know when the wind whistles? Have you heard the wind really whistle before? The wind was whistling, y'all. It was like we had to tuck the sheets and the blankets in on the side, because otherwise the minute that you laid down, a gust of wind would just like rip all the blankets off. It blew the lamp down the hill and like it broke into a bunch of pieces. And so it became like this survival moment. It was not a cute, romantic, under the stars experience. It was like us strategizing on how to set up a windshield and how to tuck in the blankets and cover our faces because the wind is quite dry. It's, very drying for your eyes and your face, and some particles and stuff like that were flowing through the air. Finally, get it all figured out, tucked in, and then all of a sudden I start to feel water on my face. And I look up and I see only the stars in the clear sky. And I'm like, there cannot be a way that it's raining right now. It's just not possible. But again, I felt some more water. And then I looked at Simone and he's like, yeah, I felt it too. And then all of a sudden, we just started getting blasted in the face with industrial size sprinklers, like farming industrial big field sprinklers, because I guess the host had forgotten to turn them off. So now we are getting blasted with water. It is super windy. We grab all the blankets that we can, running across this giant field, trying to dodge all of the sprinklers. And we throw all of the stuff that we managed to grab, like the bedding and stuff like that, that we could grab, into the back of the Jeep. And then we just laid in there and slept in the back of the Jeep. And this experience was so, so funny. Even the next day, I mean, the host was absolutely horrified. And we were like, you know what? It was so bad. Like, don't worry, because it was so bad that it's great, It was too good of an experience to be upset about in any way, shape, or form, honestly. It was just hilarious. But I love remembering whenever I'm feeling this, like, exposed feeling, I love to remember that moment because it is so symbolic for how it feels, essentially, in those moments where you're just like, cover me up, protect me from this change. Change makes us just beg, can I just have a few more moments like this? Can I just lay here for a few more moments? I don't really want to get up. I don't really want to go to that class. Or I don't really want to leave these people or this person or this friend group or this situation or this vacation. Please just give me another day. Just give me another day. The other story that I'm going to tell you, and the reason why I love to tell stories like this is because often I find lots of listeners tell me that if anything sticks on the long run, as in, like, we're coming up on 3 years now. So some of you might have heard this story before, way back. But the stories are what we remember. The stories are what we remember. And there was this one other particular story of a time that I remember just how much, change makes you feel such discomfort in so many different ways. And I was at summer camp. And if there's something that y'all probably don't know about me that's kind of a funny fact, is that when I'm in a new environment or I'm a little bit nervous about something, I'm a sleep talker, I'm a sleepwalker, I'm like kind of like all over the place. I will like do different things, and it's gotten a little bit more tame as I've gotten older, but when I was at summer camp, I was super uncomfortable because I'm a homebody. I've always been one of those kids, growing up who would like call their mom in the middle of the night at a sleepover because I couldn't sleep and I needed to go home. And everybody else is just having fun and I'm like worried that I can't sleep. That was me as a child. So I was at summer camp, which is a big thing. It was like 6 nights. It's a long time to be away from home. And I was on the top bunk. I woke up in the morning, one of the mornings, and I was freezing cold. I was freezing, and I just start to feel around for my blankets. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, what happened? Because I was completely bare. There was no sheets or blankets on my mattress, and there were no blankets and no sheets and no pillow on my bed. It was just me laying on my mattress on the top bunk. And I was like, what the heck? Where's all my stuff? And so I start going down my bunk, and I'm just like looking around. And then the person below me, my bunkmate, is like, dude, you folded all that up and you put it away like in your cubby over there. And then I look, and I had folded up and taken off the sheets and the blanket off of my bed and stashed them there. I don't know why, but the trippiest thing, and change is like that. You're like, why did I create this reality for myself? Could I really have subconsciously done that and made myself feel so exposed and so uncomfortable? But I did. And I did for some reason, right? It made sense at the time. And anytime I think about that story too, I always laugh. And I love to just remember these little moments of discomfort because there's a lot of moments of discomfort that change brings that aren't so funny and they aren't so light and they aren't so easy to deal with. But I love to remember that in the big picture, they're serving a similar function. So I'm creating an episode today on change because there are changes that are going to be coming into my life again because we are moving, which I'll share more details on shortly. But when I found out last week that it was official that we were going to move, and we basically made the official decision, I immediately felt a lot of relief and a lot of excitement. But at the same time, thinking about where exactly, as in what apartment, what place, what physical place we're going to live in, is something that made me feel a lot of unease. And I said to Simone, I said, I don't want to go right now on Zillow. I don't want to look through options. I don't want to feel the way that I've felt in these other couple experiences that we've had moving. But I said, you know what? I don't want to think about this. You know what I do want though? I said, I want to feel guided by the universe and by life. I want to feel pulled along. I want to feel like something perfect is coming up, even if it's not perfect on paper, but something that makes sense, that makes us feel excited. And these friends, I told him, he knows the friends. I'm not going to reveal the friends right now, but I said, I want an apartment like their apartment. That apartment right there, that's what I want to look for. That's the only apartment that I can think about in that particular area, in that particular place that makes me excited about living there. And so I said, I got to go on a walk. I'm going to go on a walk. I walk down to the water. I get a phone call from that friend, actually, that particular friend that has the apartment space that I love. We talk and I share the news, somewhat of disappointing news, somewhat of exciting news in different ways. And at the end of it, she says, well, you know what? I've got my own news. And reveals a reason for which they are going to be moving. And she says, you know what? So we're actually going to need somebody to take over our lease in our apartment. And I said, no shit. You're never going to believe that I didn't wish for you to move, but I did wish for your apartment space. I'm sorry. I have to say, I did wish for it. And it reminded me of this moment when I had interviewed Sri Dharma, and he mentions this action, this leap of faith towards a change, which is 100 times bigger than the change that I'm describing in my personal life that I've just given you. But he decides to leave his guru, his teacher, and he wants to go off on his own. And so he packs all his bags. He has like $50 to his name. He has no plan. And he starts to walk. And as he's walking through the park in New York, somebody calls out to him and says, Dharma, where are you going? You've got all of your things. What are you doing? And he says, I don't know. But I left, I needed to leave. I need to leave. It's that part of us that says, I need to go to the surface. I need to bring myself to the surface of something new. And they say, well, I've got a space in downtown, and I can give you a little space within there, and you can have your yoga center there. And so in the same moment, essentially, that he's walked out the door and he's walking, holding his things with no idea where to go, with no resources to make anything big happen, nothing to fall back on, the answer was given, was presented and brought to him and comes up. And that is the magic of change. And that is the magic of when we allow space within our life to have the unknown. So today's episode has an alternative title, less probably a catchy and appealing, but equally exciting. the magic of change, accessing the magic within change. Do you hear something? I feel like I hear something. It sounds kind of magical. That's it. This is what I've been telling you guys about. This is the free resource that I have for my fellow yoga teachers. It is a search engine optimization checklist, or an SEO checklist. And listen here, this is super important because as we're meeting on the online world right now, I can tell you that there are things on this list that even after 3 years of running my business, I had not thought about. And it's everything from how to optimize your Google business profile to how to be found by local clients. And so I encourage you, pause me real quick, pause me if you need to, go and get that SEO checklist. And it's something that's provided by my beloved sponsor, Offering Tree. If you've heard me mention now the SEO checklist a couple of times, it's your sign. Today's the day. Go and get it. And while you're in there with the links in the show notes, I also ask you to please drop me a rating if you have not yet rated my show, and to make sure that you are subscribed to my podcast. And also consider sending this episode or another episode to a friend of yours, or sharing it on social media. It's the most and the biggest thank you that you can give to me for, in exchange for this show, is sharing it in that way. That is really the only thing that creates the momentum. And so I appreciate y'all. I see you if you're doing that, and I send you a big thank you. Okay, into the heart of it. 5 reasons why change is exactly what you need. Number 1, change is just what you need because you need to break the pattern of the past. Because if you are not careful, the default is that your past equals your future. We think that the future inevitably brings us freedom, but it's not so unless we consciously move beyond the past. Your mind is a record of everything that you have experienced. And I'm always reminded of this one particular that I worked with. When I met her, by the time that I met her, she had changed quite dramatically from all of the other stories that I had heard from other people. And I hadn't really experienced the before version of her, maybe a little bit, but she was one of the people during the pandemic who made a massive shift. And she went from being somebody that people would describe as bitter and difficult and angry and impossible to change, and has been this way, set in her ways for X number of years, of decades. And she completely and radically changed and shifted her identity and decided she didn't want to be anymore an angry or bitter person. She started bird watching. She started joining clubs. She started making new friends and painting and being kind, exceptionally kind to people. And nobody else could really handle it because they were so used to her being the other way that they were like, this has got to be a front. Like, this is not real, And the funny thing about it is that after a while, people started to accept it. And people like me who were new and came into her life never knew any different. And so I was always a supporter of this version of her because why would I have any reason to doubt? It was all that I knew. And nothing would have changed, as you can see, if she wouldn't have changed. There was nobody in her external environment that was going to make this happen, or external shift or new job were going to make that shift. The shift happened because of her. The change happened because of her. Because if she would have continued to wake up every single day and do the same thing and see the same exact people, well, she would have continued creating more of what she had created in the past. So we need change to break free from the pattern of the past, because we don't want the past to automatically equal our future. Number 2, change is just what you need because change makes you present. And from presence, anything is possible. This is really key. Change makes us present. And change is actually the only way out. It's the only way forward. I mean, it's the only chance that we have, really. So thank God for change, because if it was not for change, we would be trapped in essentially a prison of our current cycles going around and around. Change makes you present because you have to step back to see the big picture. You have to break the habit in order to be able to see that it was a habit. You have to go somewhere new to realize that where you were was limiting you. You have to see from a new point of view in order to realize that the old point of view was out of date. And so when we get present when we get uncomfortable, when we wake up in the middle of the night and we suddenly realize we don't have any of our comfort blankets and that we're, immersing ourselves in something that feels incredibly just uncomfortable. But we sense this feeling of awareness because we get out of autopilot. The action of the change gets us out of the autopilot, out of the spiral. It's like getting up and going on a walk when you realize that you're going around in circles and what you're doing it's not currently working. I believe that being present is the answer 99.99% of the time. And it's so unfortunate that this kind of just the phrasing of like, oh, just be present and just be mindful has become such a thing that people will, including myself, will just automatically tune out because you just feel allergic to it. What a thing, to have somebody tell you like, well, if you could just be present and just slow down, then you would see that the answer is right in front of you. It's really easy, right? I know that's super annoying, but think about this. Can you think about a moment that you felt really truly present? And for me, these are moments in the morning where I might be just sipping my coffee or my tea in the morning, or it's when you're at the beach, completely immersed in the sensory experience. It could be when you are standing in front of an incredible view of the mountains or a waterfall, or you're in nature somewhere. But think about this moment of presence. And I want you to really get clear. If you can't think about the moment of presence, pause me again and really get the feeling of the presence, because I know that you felt it, right? I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do. That's what we're able to experience as humans, to be present with all kinds of different things. Once you've got it, remember that sense of presence because it's going to be important in just a moment. A friend of mine told me the other day, I want to experience a change. I want to open the door for something new. I want this part of my life to change. I want to experience this success. And I know what this success feels like a little bit in other areas of my life. But what I'm unclear on is because I know that where energy goes, attention flows, and what we focus on, we create, and what we believe in, we will see more of, and all of that. She understands that rhetoric. But then she says, what should I do? Should I try to find more of that feeling of the success that I already have? Should I try to just keep recalling it and thinking about it more and more if I want to experience the success? But I feel like I'm waiting for the success to arrive. I don't feel in the success yet. And I replied that waiting for something or wishing for something or hoping for something all imply that we are separate from that which we desire. They admit that we do not have what we want to have. And so when you look at cases, to use an example from Joe Dispenza's work, you look at cases where people heal themselves radically. And this healing example is just one example. You could apply this to other areas of your life that don't have anything to do with healing per se. But when they heal themselves, it's not because they're sitting there thinking over and over again, like, I want to heal, or even affirming, like, I want to heal, I want to heal. It's that they are getting so present that they are tapping into so many of the feelings of contentment, of love, and all of that is just happening within them. And it's not like they're unlocking some like secret storage of love, like where is the love is specifically stored at? It's that they're finding and tapping into that sense of contentment where things are so incredible just the way they are, where just this moment is so perfect. And that's why I asked you to think about that moment that you felt so present. Think about how, when you're fully immersed, how good that feels beyond any reason specifically for it feeling good. Of you're just experiencing beauty and you're experiencing love. And the moment that somebody can go that deeply into presence, that they don't even care anymore. They're not thinking about the disease or whatever was wrong. And exactly in that moment, when they feel so good with who they are and just being in that moment, that they experience, whatever you want to call it, some form of unconditional love or some form of energy or the original blueprint, right? Some people like to refer to it as that. That suddenly, in that moment, is exactly when whatever it was that was plaguing them just disappears, because it's no longer them. They've shifted an entire identity. They're no longer the person who's there wishing to be healed. They're a person who is so happy and so content and so present that the way that they see everything in their life has changed. They've brought themselves to the surface on a massive level and they've had some sort of breakthrough. And when you have a shift in your awareness like that, when you break out of that pattern of the past, you break the habit, you release all of that, what comes in could be anything. I'm going to take it down a more tangible level for you. Think about a person who has a habit, a person who has a habit of smoking, right? We know, if you look at studies at like how to break habits and how to change and this and that, the way that we really change is not by just trying to stick with something new or trying to avoid something. If you hear somebody say, well, I'm trying to blah, 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 then you know it's probably not working. It's not going to work on the long run because they're using enormous amounts of energy to say no or to say yes again and again. But when a person changes their identity and they can see themselves in a new light and they say, I'm not a person who smokes. I'm not a person who goes and buys a giant bag of sour candy and eats it every single day. I'm raising my hand if you're not watching the video, right? That was something that I used to do in my teens all the time. When you can see yourself through a new identity, then you're not using enormous amounts of energy to avoid, slipping backwards or going into these old habits or thinking about healing or hoping for change or this or that, because you just know that that's no longer you. That's not going to be the way that you're operating. And it can take a little bit of muscle work, of course, to find the consistency, to keep reading the books, to keep doing the work, whatever it takes. I mean, that's what we're here to figure out. But eventually, if you shift your identity and how you think about yourself, you free up immense amounts of energy. Number 3, change is just what you need, because in a life in which everything is constant and planned out, there is no room for the unknown. And from the unknown comes creativity, comes surprises, comes possibility, newness. And I believe that there are really 2 ways to live. There's the way to live, which is protection and survival, which is essentially trying to protect yourself from anything unexpected happening. And it leaves you exhausted. It leaves you in really low energy to react. It's like if you've spent all of your time building a massive fence, you've used all of your resources on this giant fence, and you better hope that that fence actually works. Because if the enemy gets over the fence somehow, you're completely depleted. You don't have anything left to fight. You don't even have energy to run. The second way of living is reacting in real time. It's trusting yourself to make the decision that you need to in the moment and to handle whatever you need to. It's knowing that you've always figured it out and giving yourself the time and the space and the presence, the trust in order to react in real time rather than trying to constantly anticipate every possible thing that could go wrong. When we live from the sense of protection and control, change is the enemy because we've worked really freaking hard on building that fence and we're not happy if something about it has to change. We don't want to release that sense of control. But when we live with a trust in our own ability to react in the moment, then change becomes our greatest tool and our greatest teacher. But of course, living in the sense of reacting in real time, it requires us to do the work. It requires us to get to know ourselves and our systems and to actually slow down because, yeah, we can't be caught unprepared and also completely wiped out energetically and unable to think clearly. That's going to be a recipe for the greatest disaster of all. When I first started getting into self development, I remember that I listened to some podcast back in high school about taking a different path, not always walking the exact same way, going to the exact same place at the exact same time. And think about the people that you would meet if you just walk down a different floor that you would otherwise never walk down. And so at school, I started taking different routes to places, even if it was like going out of my way, because I was just trying to bring in a little bit more newness. I was trying to change my direction and who I would run into essentially. And it's funny because in one of those moments that I was doing that, I was near the end of the school year, my senior year. I was carrying a big bag of textbooks that I was going to return. And that bag ripped and all of the textbooks fell down the stairs. And it was this big dramatic event. And then this stranger, this random person that truthfully I don't even remember what his name is, helped me pick all the books up and carried them to the library. And that was a story that I ended up putting in my graduation speech and a story that I would remember for a really, really long time. But the funniest part about it is that that particular person wouldn't have even been there if I would have been taking the normal path. I mean, maybe somebody else would have helped me, maybe not, because he was late to class, and you're not supposed to be late to class because of that. So, how much room do you leave for the unknown? How much room for chance, for yeah, how much space essentially do you allow for unplanned things to come in? And it can be really helpful to intentionally expand that space, go somewhere early with no plan and just be there. 20 minutes, not scrolling, not anything, just hanging around, see what happens, see who also may be hanging around. There might be somebody aligned that you would really love to talk to. Number 4, change is just what you need because change and choosing change is building a muscle. It is a way for you to essentially reclaim your power. So often, we wait to change until we are incredibly desperate, until we are incredibly uncomfortable, until we really hit a rock bottom and we say, okay, well, I absolutely cannot continue doing this, so something needs to change. But choosing change proactively, constantly understanding and embracing this age-old phrase of change is the only constant and really using that to shape our experience is like reclaiming the power of God or the power of the universe within you, which sounds again absolutely insane, maybe, but if you really think about it, choosing to change is like creating a new reality for yourself. And it's removing yourself from being at the mercy of external events that we now understand are kind of like the past continuing to spiral and to blossom into different things. It's to take back the reins from that and say, we're actually going to go in this direction. That is the real power. The real power is to get out of the blaming of a circumstance or a person or, some other reason for why we cannot change or why it's not working to change, and to figure out a way to make it happen. And once you've done it one time, then you have the proof that you've done it, and you can apply that to every other thing that you're doing in your life. And that is how momentum is built. It's just built with one tiny grain, one tiny step, one moment where, like I always say, that you got up and went to the playground and decided to swing in the morning. Like, how crazy would that be if you started your day like that tomorrow? Like, when was the last time you went swinging at the park, and let alone at 7 a.m. in the morning or whatever, right? But you could. You have all of the power in the world to do that if you really want to, even if it means you sleep a little bit less or something like that. One of my favorite phrases to remember in these sort of pivotal moments of to change or not to change, or how badly do I really want to believe in a new version of myself? How willing am I to actually slow down and to get incredibly present, and to remember that whatever spiral I'm hung up on in this particular moment, and it is really not the end of the world, and it's actually probably limiting some other incredibly beautiful experiences that I could be having in my life, is the phrase that what people can do is extraordinary. What they will do is another story. So what you can do is extraordinary. What you will do is another story. But the good news is that you get to write that story. And this gets back into these big questions of, who are you really? What are you made of? Who are we? I had this one boss who told me that she hates zooming out on maps. If you zoom out, I think on Apple Maps so much, you see like the whole globe, and then you see the blackness of space. And then it's comical because you can be like really zoomed in. You can just keep zooming out, and you will eventually see the black space around the globe. And she said, I hate that. I hate seeing that. It's like, it's creepy. It's the unknown, I say, look directly at the unknown each and every time that you can. And doing this kind of work on reclaiming your ability to actively make change in your life, and understanding the ripple effect, it's not a luxury. It is what should come first. It is first, because it is what changes everything. Number 5, change is exactly what you need, because to experience change is the purpose of it all. And within this change, what we're experiencing exactly, I think, are the elements of freshness and the elements of transformation. Within the freshness, I love the concept of freshness, because it reminds me of a fruit where it's got this prime and this ripeness, this peak moment, or fresh cut flowers where you cut them, and at first they're so beautiful, so fragrant, and then after a couple of days the water gets a little bit murky, they start to wilt a little bit, and if it's anything like a hot environment like it is here, you have to throw them out within a couple of days. They are no longer that sense of freshness. And then maybe you go on a walk and you pick some more wildflowers and bring them again back in. But they're fresh. They're not permanent. They're freshness. It's like why a stream becomes super stagnant if it gets dammed up and the water isn't always moving through, then the natural balances within the water become thrown off. And with transformation, let us remember our story of the dragonfly, which I was going to tell here at the end of the episode, but since I told it at the beginning of the episode, that is the peak, the cherry on top of all of this, is to experience that transformation, to experience moving from lack and limitation, from the dark to the light, and from the light to the dark, and from the dark to the light again, from the lows to the highs, and the highs to the lows, and the lows to the highs. And the fluctuations of our mind are just like that. So maybe you go back and you listen again just one more time to the dragonfly's dream, which was at the beginning of this episode, And you might just let that inspiration, that pathway speak more than over explaining it ever could. Maybe you just apply it to a little bit, one little area of your life today, or maybe you use it as something to hold on to, like a life ring in the wild, wild waters of change that you might already be immersed in, sometimes beyond what you would have chosen. But whether or not you are navigating change currently or thinking about navigating a change, I hope that this episode has given you a little bit of peace and also just enough of that tingly sensation of excitement to make you a little bit uncomfortable. And thank you for spending your time today with me talking about this. Quick reminder to please drop me a rating and to subscribe. And also that if you are enjoying these conversations that we have on the Leadership and Yoga podcast, that I have an upcoming retreat in Montezuma, Costa Rica at Amor de Mar, January 25th through 29th. And it's a chance to practice with me in person and also to have all of these conversations live and also to have them with a like-minded group of fellow students and teachers and like-minded people. So I'll leave the link for that as well in the show notes, and I hope to see you there if that is something that interests you. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, of your morning, of your evening. I will catch you in the next episode. Ciao, ciao.